Now, in the history of the United States, every elected president has enjoyed a peaceful transfer of power following a concession speech by the losing candidate. Now, in these elections, President Donald Trump has so far refused to concede. Instead, he's calling for recounts in multiple states where he lost to President-elect Joe Biden. He's also filing a series of lawsuits. Now, Biden says Trump's refusal to accede defeat is embarrassing and will ultimately hurt his legacy as America's 45th head of state. In the meantime, the Trump administration is frustrating Biden's transition, excluding him from crucial security briefings and budgets to begin building his key staff. Let's unpack the story for you now. Dr Dinesh Sharma is Director and Chief Research Officer at Steamworks. He joins us now with the latest from New York. Dr Sharma, good morning, good evening to you. Thanks so much for your time this morning. Fraudulent ballots, says the Trump administration. A fraudulent election as well, but only the ballots that went to Biden are fraudulent. Is that right? Those that went to Trump, those are above board, according to him at least.
Yeah, it's quite a theater, right? We don't know what America is right now. Is it an authoritarian democracy or a oligarchy or, somewhere between social democracy? It's hard to tell at this point. The Republicans certainly are very much not saying anything, remaining silent or backing Mr. Trump complicitly. It's not clear what their intention is or what Mr. Trump himself is planning to do. But certainly in the 240 years history of this country, we haven't seen anything like this in terms of transition or transfer of power. Yeah. So clearly a first for the United States. So we've gone from, ethno-nationalism, America first, to some sort of, as I said, democratic authoritarianism. It's not clear what's going on. And a lot of, pundits are also kind of scratching their heads trying to figure out what Mr. Trump is trying to do in firing a whole lot of people in the Pentagon, just getting rid of them, carte blanche, and also shuffling his staff within the Security Council area as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a bizarre situation that's unfolding at the White House. Mike Pompeo, for one, the most senior diplomat in the U.S., also going on record to say, yes, we are preparing for we're preparing for a peaceful transition of power, and that transition is to a second term of Trump presidency.
Yeah, and clearly, I would say all of the news outlets were freaking out, trying to interpret, just like you are, trying to figure out what that means. Was he just playing on a turn of phrase at a press conference, or was he trying to say something seriously? So, in fact, General McCaffrey, a five-star general, I'm pretty sure, came out yesterday and said in one of the news programs, if I were observing a third world country, I would think that a strong man is trying to overturn an election. I'm quoting him, paraphrasing him exactly. So that's kind of where we are. This is a five-star general who's saying this. So if I were to interpret the actions, as an observer, as a citizen, I would be concerned, yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think if we look at the behavior of President Trump over the last 4 years, if we look at his campaign in the run-up to the election itself, he said, and he was very confident in winning a second term, and he said it would be the most embarrassing thing for him to lose to Joe Biden, because in his words, he would be losing to the worst candidate. From what you know about President Donald Trump, following him on Twitter, watching him speak over the last 4 years and long before that as well, as a businessman, as a television personality, this, when it comes down to it, is just really, really embarrassing for him.
It is, yeah. So the multitude of reasons for that, of course. He has lots of lawsuits that are waiting for him the minute he becomes a citizen in New York, in the Southern District of New York, as well as lawsuits related to election fraud in terms of how the money was spent in 2016. And then there are private entities who are trying to sue him as well. Michael Cohen, among others, who was one of his attorneys, personal attorneys, who spent time in jail, also has actions against him. So he really faces quite a barrage of legal challenges the minute he becomes a citizen. And so I think that's clearly one of the things that really worrying him, I believe. Of course, in addition to the fact that, he presided over a very contentious 4 years, highest, death rate in terms of global statistics. The U.S. has, close to 10.6 million cases, 250,000 people almost have died. And so, the president is really facing a defeat within the first term, unlike, many presidents that have preceded him. Clearly, a lot of people voted for him, almost 71 million people, because there was a huge turnout. But he was bested, of course, by Mr. Biden by almost 5 million votes. So Mr. Biden has set a record in terms of the largest vote getter, certainly in recent memory, even, topping President Obama, who's clearly, one of the more popular presidents we've had in recent time, whose memoir is about to come out in a couple of days, which is making the headlines here. So I think we're living through one of those, very historical turn of the century, largest pandemic in a century kind of a moment. And the country is divided almost in half, as I've written about it in several recent articles. And there's almost a kind of a nationalistic fervor, ethno-nationalistic, white nationalism fever that's running through the country that hasn't fully broken yet. And Mr. Trump is really holding the country hostage, I would say, because he's not conceding.
You talk about, the effects of his presidency over the last 4 years. Just the way he's handled the election and the election outcome, what are some of the effects that you foresee for the Republican Party itself?
Yeah, I think the Republican Party, if we can call it a party at this time, has become Trump's party. So its future is really quite unclear. I mean, it's broken up into multiple parts. So the Lincoln Project, which is basically ardent strategist Republicans who have backed, McCain and Reagan and Mr. Romney for many years. Previous Republican candidates have really campaigned against Mr. Trump. So we don't know what's going to happen to the Republican Party. But of course, with Trump's popularity and 71 million votes that he's garnered, there is a likelihood that he could make a run for it again in 2024. Remains to be seen. But I would say, I was just arguing about this with somebody earlier. I think he will face challenges on the primary side if he were to run again. So I wouldn't, I would say the Republican Party is really quite unclear in terms of what the structure of the party is right now. Clearly, Mr. Trump's children are making a move to take over the RNC and the financial situation within the RNC and the budgets within the RNC. For their own, potentially own reasons to be able to pay their debts from the campaigns that they've run. But I would say DNC, Democratic National Party right now seems to be in a stronger position, headed by a very level-headed, empathic, politician who's been around for many, many years as really the party bearer.
Yeah. I mean, come what may, his term in office expires on the 20th of January next year. I understand that Vice President Pence is set to announce the election results on January 6th, so about 2 weeks before then. How do you see this unfolding?
Yeah, so I think November 20th is the date when the first set of states begin to certify the election. So there's nothing in the Constitution that we can garner that says, if a new winner is declared, then Mr. Trump, basically has to vacate the premises. Yeah. And that's, a lot of his opponents are chanting that basically on TikTok and on Twitter and on Facebook. There are all kinds of memes going around about how to show Mr. Trump the exits here and welcome in a new president. I think the sad part is that Mr. Biden, is not getting the proper welcome that he should be getting at this point. He's not getting the security briefings. He's not getting the budget approved. He's not getting the office space that he needs for his transition team. He's building his transition team right now, has a strong cabinet that he will be able to put together through the previous Obama team where he was vice president for 8 years. So I think people are at this point basically taking a big sigh of relief that America has just dodged a bullet from whatever schemes Mr. Trump was cooking up or may still be cooking up, and that American democracy at the end of the day may just survive, although hobbling really at this point toward the finish line.
Yeah.
In terms of this election.
Absolutely.
While the world is watching.
Dr. Dinesh Sharma, I have to thank you for your time. Thank you so much for staying up late in New York and joining us this morning on the AM Report here in South Africa. He is Director and Chief Research Officer at Steamworks Studio as we continue to unpack the US elections and when exactly President Donald Trump will concede.